Rennie Good was a gifted soul, a writer and a poet and a mother, wow. She tried to hit an agent with her car, oh no! Pop, motherfucker, now she's gone! Yeah, yeah, yeah! Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease! You fuck around and find out it's what it is! Jeffrey Pretty was a Jewish homo. Started talking shit to protect a chomo. He was getting nicked when he pulled a gun. Bam, motherfucker, now you're gone! Yeah, yeah, yeah! Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease! Fuck around and find out what that is!
Hey guys, welcome to the program. We're going to do a Supreme Court lesson today. You're going to want to know about it because there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars of media spent telling weak minds this was President Trump rigging the election. And it's total crap. By the way, folks, would you please lift a finger and finger me right now? Please? I'm begging you. Please raise a finger, like, share this program. You're going to want to get your friends and family involved in it because I'm going to make you the smartest patriot in the room to understand how to push back on all of this stuff. It's key. Today's program is brought to you by the fine folks at Goldco. I'm only asking you to go to jovanlovesgold.com. That's where I partner with Goldco. I want you to get on should we say, leading edge of understanding what to do. They're going to change everything we're doing to a digital dollar, digital economy. All of us are going to lose 1% as they go over. You're going to want to understand how to mitigate that, please. And by the way, thank you for reposting the stream. This is how you get it out there. Repost the stream. For some odd reason, we're not on Facebook. We're not on Facebook today or the last few days because you remember the video where I critiqued the young mom letting her little bitty girl twerking and we're covering it. And this is despicable, the whole bit. You know that. Well, I got booted for it or put on restriction for it. And they won't even let me correct it. When I say correct it, you're able to say, no, it's a news story. Here's what we were covering and doing, and they'll reinstate it. Well, they've disabled that last part of it, so we can't correct it. So they're able to permanently get rid of that program. So that's why some of you are not on Facebook at the moment. And that's why you need to know all of my platforms. Main platform is Rumble. Okay. Rumble. That's the main platform. Also, all of you interested in the gold land, gemstone land and stuff, you've started getting your next round of emails just to confirm, you did the 12 questions. We've got to confirm back with you that we've got it right. And so you'll be required to confirm, yes, that's right, as we get going in this process. Now it will accelerate. Anyway, whatever you do, make sure you're following on the base channel, right? Click that thumbs up or click the thumbs down, like the people that wait for as soon as we post the show and click thumbs down. Today's program is going to be history. It's a special presentation. Supreme Court ruling gets back to the election law. We're going to show you how it works and what you need to know. Hang tight. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
Not fixing 2020 will damn our nation forever. The historic Maricopa County full forensic audit effort processed 20,895,610 digital and forensic images of varying formats, resulted in 208 million individual evidence-proof files. The system processed over 58 billion forensic measurements, resulting in over 2 trillion individual base computations. No hopium, no hype, just hardcore forensic evidence. Please make sure the Maricopa County Full Forensic Audit Archives survive. Donate now. So if you want what happened in the 2020 election fixed, then please donate to protect and secure this historic evidence. We can't do it without you. We need you. America.
Why do 80% of gardeners struggle with weeds? Because they haven't discovered no-dig gardening yet. Imagine a garden where you spend less time digging and more time harvesting. Sounds like a dream, right? Or to a no-dig gardening is your key to a sustainable, low-maintenance and incredibly productive garden. By layering organic matter like compost and mulch directly on the soil, you'll boost soil health, reduce weeds, conserve water and save tons of time and energy. Plus, you'll be supporting biodiversity and preventing soil erosion. It's a win-win. Whether you're a seasoned green thumb or just starting out, no-dig gardening, cultivating abundance the natural way. By Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, has all the expert insights you need. From site selection to layering techniques, this book is your ultimate guide to a flourishing, eco-friendly garden. So are you...
Rennie Good was a gifted soul, a writer and a poet and a mother, wow. She tried to hit an agent with her car, oh no! Pop motherfucker, now she's gone! Yeah! Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease! You fuck around and find out it's what it is!
Warning. The following program has been rated Gilligaff and is intended for open-minded audiences. If the truth offends you, or if you are allergic to focused intensity, intellectual athleticism, or the occasional F-bomb or even irreverent humor, please switch off now. If your delicate sensibilities need to be worried about or addressed, might we recommend the Underwater Basket Weaving channel to you? Otherwise, sit back, enjoy the wisdom, insight, and wicked sense of humor.
Cut the crap. How many times a day do you want to say that to politicians, the elite, the loony liberals, the fake news media, and the gender-confused, emotional socialist snowflake crowd? Cut the crap is your secret weapon for fighting for our freedoms and our great republic. It all begins with a massive mental enema, freeing you from the toxic news and politically correct views, which constipate your consciousness with stinking thinking. Your host, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. He's known for calling out politicians and telling them to cut the crap. You've seen him on virtually every television network and listened to him on Coast to Coast Radio. And now he's here to help you learn to fight for America. Culture, race, and American politics. They all have one thing in common. They all need to cut the crap. Now, here's your host, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer.
Okay, folks, here we go. We're going to be talking about the Supreme Court ruling gets back to the election. A little bit of housekeeping first. Number one, for those of you who have family members having surgical procedures today, we wish you absolutely the very best. Everything will be fine. I also want to let you know that it seems that Rudy Giuliani has been hospitalized, and it may be pretty serious. Now, Rudy's never been in the greatest health. I'm sure stress has went through the roof with all these lawsuits with him. And I'm pretty sure he basically took the clot shots. I do not know what to expect. I have no inside information, but prayers for Rudy Giuliani. But anybody like that is MAGA, I would be terrified to go into the hospital, right? And then you may have saw in the news that there was a drone attack for Amazon AWS servers, etc. Somebody asked if it affected the audit archives. Not at all. They're massively redundantly backed up in a secured chain of custody. They're not at all affected. We are totally fine. Also, immediately following this program, I will continue my education series on Islam. This one's called The Blood Caravans of the Sahara. Now, I do that exclusively over at my locals. Watch for a link at the end of the program. It'll pop up in chat, and that's where you can hop and join me. If you're on Rumble, use the red oval you'll see on your page that says join. I'm doing a series exclusively on Islam so you understand, right? Well, this Islamic issue and what's going on. Now, here's where we're going to begin. I'm going to give you a little bit of history first, because what you're going to do is you're going to check so I'm going to give you a little bit of history. I'm going to give you news stories and what the chatter is, what everybody's saying. Oh, this is the end of the world. And then we're going to look exactly at the law, right, for you to help you audit on your own. Now, you're hearing chatter that the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. Oh, my God. We normally hear, oh, my God, they're going to ask a Black American to have an ID. Oh, my God. Well, that's not it. But you understand this. So the Civil Rights Act of 1960 is what everybody refers to. And this was during Eisenhower's tenure that it started. It followed the Civil Rights Act of 1957. There were multiple iterations of this. I absolutely refuse, and I'll point it out. If you were to look it up, you'll see African American. That hyphenated shit is bullshit. So for Black Americans, this started. So 1957, okay? So it was, after the Civil War, it was the most legislation trying to deal with Black voters. And of course, in the Democratic South, by the Democratic Party, a Black person did not count as a whole human. It's just the truth. And so what it did, the laws used to be weak regarding something known as poll taxes, right? You've heard of poll taxes, okay? And so at the time, there were what they called discriminatory practices. Now, I want to let you know there is discriminatory practices. That means something that has to happen that you're forced to practice. That's a physical thing. In the modern area, it's become discriminatory inference, microaggressions, where you looked my way and it scared me and therefore I can't do it. Okay. The discriminatory practices they had back then in poll tax were literacy tests. If you couldn't read or write, you weren't allowed to vote. Isn't that interesting? Folks were more literate back in the 60s than they are now. Half of the American population wouldn't be able to vote right now if there were literacy tests, right? There were poll taxes. You got to pay to vote. Of course, if you didn't have money, you're not going to vote. And then there was intimidation by local officials, like the Black Panthers. Wait, no, that was allowed. Southerners holding guns saying, you get out of here, boy. Anyway, all of this legitimately created barriers, right? Barriers to voting. And this is where the issue of disenfranchised voters came up. And then in Texas, they had it, Tejanos, all kinds of stuff, okay? And for decades, the 15th Amendment, President Dwight D. Eisenhower and Congress, they passed later on the 1960 Act to close loopholes that they felt were originally in the 1957 law. Right? So they authorized federal inspections to examine voter registration records. Now, I want you to understand this. I'm going to go through this exceptionally slow. The 1957 Voter Rights Act had in it laws that said you can't create fake voting records. You can't register non-existing people. And you must preserve the records. Now, that sounds pretty logical, doesn't it? Those were on the books in 1957. But by the time 1960 came around, they said, well, the government can't expect and examine and verify voting records. Yeah, it was on the books. There was a federal right to examine and prove up every single voting record. And by the way, it was a federal crime. It was a federal crime back then to put bullshit on the books, because this was deemed to basically obstruct voting attempts. And so you had to keep the papers. You had to make sure the voter registration was authentic. It had to be a real person, and it had to be able to be tested. Well, that was racist. So they removed it, that part of it. Okay. And so the one that came about in 1960 was said to be an incremental step towards federal oversight of elections and laid the groundwork for stronger protections. Now, what it did is it allowed the Department of Justice to actually gather concrete evidence through records inspections, and it helped document systemic voter suppression that would later fuel what was called the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So they told you it was going to get better, but they took things out. So what it did is it included provisions beyond voting. In other words, there were penalties, okay, for denying court-ordered school desegregation. And it kind of, supported this broader civil rights and activism and public pressure that was going on. Again, you see how all this gets messed up? People forget the meaning of these things. People forget that was going on. Anyway, on May 2nd, 1960, it was signed, and it basically said it's robust intervention to enforce constitutional voting guarantees where states actively resisted them. Okay? Now, they said at the time, you're hurting black people. You're scaring black people. You're not taking care of black people. Okay? Now, that was the rule. That was the rule of how it was done. Very things that we fight for to this day that we think should be fixed. And by the way, we're covering the Supreme Court ruling that gets back to election law. But the left is going to be screaming, that's not true, that's not real, that's not what's going on, you're not telling the truth, etc. Okay? Dang it. It does it again. Hang tight. You're going to see a blip on my screen. So hang on 1 second. Okay, we're back. Everything should be fine and hunky-dory now. I don't know why that seems to be continually happen when we cover some of this hard stuff, but it does. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Anyway, so what we're covering the Supreme Court ruling and what it really affects and what's going on. So first, I want to show you how everybody is screaming against it. I'll give you one screamer about it, Al Not So Sharp, and then I'll show you the logic behind it, and then we'll go on.
The voting rights decision by the Supreme Court on the Louisiana case is devastating. It shoots a bullet in the heart of voting rights that was gained through bloodshed and through all kinds of machinations to deny blacks and people of color the right to deal with the fact they were being racially excluded from voter protection and therefore their right to vote. In the statement made by Justice Kagan, she graphically laid out the grievous and dramatic way this will impact the electorate and therefore the citizens. All citizens have to pay the same taxes, but we will not have the same representation and the same protection for that. And I think that what has happened in this ruling really puts at risk the question of how we started the whole celebration of the 250th anniversary of the country. No taxation without representation, where they've just severely impacted blacks having the right for representation, but we still have equal taxation. We must, as we celebrate the country's anniversary, not go back to those times where blacks and others didn't have any rights that were to be protected.
Okay. A little bit of historical fact. Democrat Party was the KKK. Basically, what few slaves that were there, they got released, 40 acres and a mule. Democrats decide they wanted to control them. But Democrats, basically, the Democrats were the ones that were enforcing, well, you got to take a test. Well, you got to pay a tax. They just wanted to keep them away from the polls because they knew that people of color, Americans of color, would do away with the stuff those guys wanted. So they tried to control them. It's very important. You've got to understand your history. It's very important to understand that from Jesse Jackass to Al Not So Sharp, the Democrat Party puts up ignorant fools that will say anything for money, like Maxine Waters, and they use them as puppets. People should understand that. But here's what's really at issue.
And so the issue is racism. It is inherently racist to draw lines and divide people up by race. I mean, the definition of it would be we're going to divide ourselves up by race and say only a black congressman can represent black people, only a Hispanic congressman can represent Hispanic people. That is patently illegal
but the
under
issue
U.S.
is
law.
they were trying to fix
also
the problem.
it also makes no sense when you consider that we're all Americans and we can vote for whoever we want. And often, according to the statistics, we do.
You do understand when you walk in to vote and you see all the names on the ballot, you have full right and title interest to vote for who the hell you want to vote for. So see, it's not really about what's printed on the ballot, is it? Nope, not at all. It's about all these little districts gerrymandered, rigged all over the place to take all of the areas where black people live, right? And draw these little tentacles. And then in an area that's primarily conservative, because they have mastered capturing the black vote, to undo conservative places. So it is about racism, because this is what's happened. So let me show you the rest of the complaining. You'll know some of these not so bright superstars like Mr. Warnock.
They don't like inclusion. And
they don't like inclusion. They don't like us black folks. Hell, we can't even work, carry out an holiday.
They don't like inclusion. And the foolhardiness of them deciding. First of all, no one elected this court to decide what kind of remedies we need in this moment.
Isn't that an interesting statement? Well, nobody elected the Supreme Court. That's an interesting little slip up there.
They don't like inclusion, and the foolhardiness of them deciding. First of all, no one elected this court to decide what kind of remedies we need in this moment. It's really not up to the Supreme Court to say, well, we have reached a threshold where this issue around race and inclusion is no longer necessary. That is not the job of the court. And I'm struck, quite frankly, by the very easy and nonchalant way in which this extreme activist court knocks down precedent after precedent. The bar for doing that ought to be high, but we're seeing it with this court. Whether it comes, whether we're talking about voting rights or whether we're talking about a woman's bodily autonomy.
The party who doesn't even know what a woman is protects women. Always look at the words. I'm surprised this court strikes down precedents. He might have been saying presidents, but we're going to give him credit. It's precedents. See, that's it. If they can get one on the books, then they say, well, no, that's what it is, and we don't have to pay attention to the law. That's what I'm going to do in a minute. I'm going to basically give you the comparisons to what was going on and what the law is, and then you're going to decide for yourself instead of letting media crap in your cranium like this.
Hey, Kentucky, KDB Chair Coleman Elridge here. In case you have not heard or seen the news today, the U.S. Supreme Court effectively gutted the...
Is there a trend among these speakers that we should be aware of that they all have in common?
Hey, Kentucky, KDB Chair Coleman Elridge here. In case you have not heard or seen the news today, the U.S. Supreme Court effectively gutted the 1965 Voting Rights Act, a cornerstone of the civil rights movement championed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They virtually ended all protections for minority voters. The Supreme Court just gave Republican legislatures permission to strip voting power away from African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and other communities of color. And for years, we know that the GOP has been trying to rig congressional maps and suppress voters' voices in order to give themselves even more power by taking a power away from voters that they have written off. With today's SCOTUS decision, they can continue their quest to disenfranchise Americans legally. The impact of this ruling is not ambiguous to me. I was born in 1981 and was the first person in my immediate family to be born with the unencumbered right to vote. Not my mother, not my father, but me. The Supreme Court majority, MAGA Republicans, and the president may want America to go back, but America is better than their cynicism. And we know that Americans standing on the right side of history can and always will bend the moral arc of the universe towards liberty and justice for all. Racial gerrymandering has no place in a democracy, and Kentucky Democrats are committed to defending the right of every American citizen to be heard and to vote. So make sure that you visit our website, www.kydemocrats.org, for more information on upcoming primary elections.
So the only truth of that is the KY Democrats. Because if you believe this stuff, you might as well just get lubed up. But isn't it funny? They have been deciding districts by gerrymandering to keep it decidedly black. And now when the Supreme Court rules that's not allowed, they say that what they were doing, the other party's doing, and that's illegal. We need to go back to what we were doing. Let's get some more intellectual insight into this.
You know, this decision, we knew this was coming because they've been chipping away at this for a long time. The court said, you know, there's no problem with race anymore, and yet we're fighting every day talking about Project 2025. We know what's happening, and it's going to start happening to women as well, because all these changes in voting where they're saying you can't use your...
You're going to get rid of women. Oh, wait a minute. Shit, we did that because it's dude with dongs. But forget that.
You know, this decision, we knew this was coming because they've been chipping away at this for a long time. The court said, you know, there's no problem with race anymore, and yet we're fighting every day talking about Project 2025. We know what's happening, and it's going to start happening to women as well. Because all these changes in voting where they're saying you can't use your married name, you got to go get your birth certificate. You know, so this is going to affect a lot of people. Right now, it sounds like it's just affecting people of color. We know better. We knew this was coming. So this is meant to discourage you from voting. This is meant to make you feel like you don't have a voice. You do have a voice. Do not forget that. But do you see it as a step backwards also?
Now think about that. She actually said, you're not going to be allowed to be married in your married name, and they're going to... This is how they spin it. The Voting Act, it says you got to prove who you are, and people's proof documents are their birth certificate. Of course, you weren't married then, and that's always going to be on your birth certificate. But okay. Folks, what we're doing is the Supreme Court has made a ruling to get back to the election law. I started out basically explaining to you what the law originally did. You can't tell somebody you got to take a literacy test to prove you can vote. You got to pay money to show up to vote or any of that crap, or intimidation, right? Guns, well, unless you're the Black Panthers. By the way, immediately following the program, we're going to continue my series on Islam. We're going to talk about the blood caravans of the Sahara. That's over on my locals. You'll join it by clicking the red join oval, right? If you're on Rumble, this one's going to blow your socks off. So let's talk about this. So on April 26th, just back a little bit, the Supreme Court issued a landmark decision 6-3. Now, what this decision is, they basically went back to a Louisiana ruling, and it's designed to restore the true intent of the Voting Rights Act. You saw Warnock said, well, they went against precedents. Okay. What Louisiana done is they did a congressional redistricting map. So let me explain how this works in its simplest term. They took a very large conservative area that was always held conservative. Then they started at the little bitty blue part, which was primarily Black neighborhoods, and they drew these tentacles like a finger. So instead of being an obvious map, you see all these little tentacles going, and they basically sucked in all the areas where Black people predominantly lived until they had enough Black people to be over and above the number of white people. And that's how they made the district, but the district was conservative. And so since they bank on controlling the vote, that's how they flipped it from red to blue. Okay, that's a very simplified explanation of it. So what Louisiana did is they created a second majority Black district. And so it was Judge Alito who basically wrote on this decision. And here's the bottom line. You got to understand, if it's based on skin color, and that's why you make the decision, and that's it, well, isn't that the definition of racism? So they were actually drawing it based on race, because they know they control the race. Anyway, Justice Alito held that the map constituted an unconstitutional racial gerrymander under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. He basically said, wait a minute. You redrew, right? You redrew your map based on color, and therefore you're controlling it that way. Okay. And so basically what happens is compliance of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, it's the VRA, by the way, of 1965. The court ruled did not provide a compelling justification for drawing district lines predominantly on the base of race. I read to you what the rules were. No special test to prove you can do this or do that. By the way, that's how they do the voter ID, because you got to take a test to get your driver's license. Therefore, because you have to do a test to do a car, to be able to drive a car, that's how they use that little loophole and say, well, it's against race and you can't have an ID. This is how all this manipulation of words work. Anyway, he basically said, wait a minute, this is drawn specifically on race, and this is exactly what the VRA of 1965 said is not allowable. And so what it did is the decision basically narrowed the application of how they used the words to manipulate us, meaning result test. Okay, result test. This is what it all spins on. And so they basically cleared this up and say the courts must disentangle race from partisanship. That's it. Race from partisanship. They're using race because they got so many controlled, keep them unemployed, keep them on welfare. You're going to keep on voting for the check. We've talked about this before, that you must disentangle this. And if any redrawing is done, right, that you are going to have to absolutely prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this basic district, which should just be natural lines and barriers, you're going to have to prove that it discriminates instead of just bitching and moaning and saying it discriminates. See, there's never had to be proof of discrimination. You just had to say it, right? They're not showing that Black Americans can't vote because they didn't present an ID. Never have. They just said it's racist. If that's the case, then the Chicago library to get your card and in at the Obama library requires showing of an ID. But then again, I digress. It's rules for thee, not for me, as they think. Anyway, so it basically said you have to prove it. You can't just say it. Now, the dissenters were the normal ones. Justice Elena Kagan argued that the ruling rendered Section 2 all but a dead letter. But the majority's reasoning precisely realigns redistricting with what the Voting Rights Act and the Constitution were always meant to achieve. Voting rights enforced without regard to color or race. See, that's the key. They were drawing these districts specifically to color and race, when the law says they must be drawn without any regard for color or race. So what you need to understand is why this is actually restoration, right? This is not a retreat backwards like they're saying. This is not a return to Jim Crow eras and the beating of slaves or anything like that. It is basically a restoration, a return to the original text and purpose of the Voting Rights Act. It was enacted in 1965 amid the Civil Rights Movement, and the Voting Rights Act was Congress's response to systematic state-sponsored, that's the key, state-sponsored, you had Alabama's doing it, maybe Mississippi, etc., discrimination against Black Americans. This was specifically in the South. It did occur. Okay. Back then, what it said is, okay, you got to show up to vote. You got to show us you can read, because if you can't read the names on the ballot, how do you know you're voting for? So they had reading tests, like I told you that. They had poll taxes. They had Godfather clauses in it. And then they actually had outright violence. The guys would stand out in front of the polling places with their guns, like the Black Panthers, intimidating. Oh, wait. Well, the Black Panthers would do that now, but then white guys would do it, and it was a crime. Okay. So the object of the original act, Section 2, was to prohibit any way, right, to make a qualification for voting or a prerequisite for voting. Listen to those words. Qualification for voting or prerequisite for voting. Do you see you see the same scam they're doing using this Section 2 clause? Well, you're saying they got to have a voter ID, and that's a qualification, and that's a prerequisite. Oh, wait. Well, I know they're from Ethiopia, Nigeria, Somalia, and everybody else, and you say they got to be an American, but that's a qualification and a prerequisite to vote. You see how this goes back to this thing? This is how our laws are written, as total crap. And they know it. And I've told you, it's all about words, folks. It's all about words. Anyway, and so they say you can't impose these things in a manner which results in a denial or abridgment of the right of any, by the way, here's the word, citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. You see, they'll pay attention to one point, throw the other one away. Anyway, the law back then when it was put in was basically the colorblind law. But America's so racist, and we've had racism, and it's racist, and they don't allow Black people, and they're going to kill transgender people. And anyway, okay, so this was the colorblind wording memorialized in our Constitution. And it was basically, literally, race-neutral electoral process, where every single citizen's vote carried equal weight. Now, remember, when you go in, regardless of the district, when you go in and vote, you get to choose who you vote. But understand what they did. They take a red area here. They draw these gerrymandering lines to get in as much color as they can to have the color outweigh the conservative. Oh, yeah, that council votes. There you go. You follow what I'm understanding? This is what they did. Now, this is what Martin Luther King basically envisioned when he said America shouldn't be judged by color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And then you hear people like Warnock and these guys, they invoke Martin Luther King, which if he was still alive, he would beat their ass with a stick, wouldn't he? Because it's no color. And what you're doing is you're undoing his work to make it about color. And so the principle of the Voting Rights Act was designed to advance, not undermine voting. So what happened is this began later on. Remember, Warnock set precedent. This began later on when they would sue over it, and they would have legislative expansions, and they twisted the intent. The key right there, that's why I tell you, it's all about the words. That's why I kick your ass. Quit saying voting machines. We don't have voting machines. You use the old words, you're going to get the old results. Anyway, and so this is where they started twisting the words. So in 1982, Congress amended Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to incorporate a results test, which is something for the dilution of claims. They responded to a Supreme Court order at the time, which was city of Mobile, Alabama, versus Bolin in 1980, which required proof of discriminatory intent. Okay? Here's where the little shift was. So you have the act, and then you have this little lawsuit later. It always said you have to prove it was discriminatory intent. So this little amendment that they snuck in, the plaintiffs prevailed by allowing that electoral practice. Well, they resulted in minority voters having less of an opportunity than the electorate to participate in the political process to elect representatives of their choice. See how long we've been playing this feelings game? We haven't been demanding evidence. Now you understand why the word racism is so weaponized. Most of the time you say, I wasn't being racist. Yes, you were. I wasn't being racist. Yes, you were. Because they get by on the words instead of absolute proof. Now you understand why this is such a hot point. This is basically saying you don't just get to claim it anymore. Bullshit. You've got to prove it. You've got to prove, like a driver's license, you've got to prove that them having a driver's license, the fact that they have it somehow prevented them from voting. You get it? So it kind of takes away some of the stuff. So the Supreme Court kind of fleshed this out later on, right? And what's called Thornburg versus Gingles. It's like giggles, but one of the G's is an N. Gingles in 1986. And it basically then set out the three preconditions for Section 2 violations. Okay? Now, what this did was this basically allowed some of this to happen. Here's why. It said, number one, for it to really be a violation, you have to show that the minority group is significantly large and geographically compact to form a minority in a single district. That means they really have to be here. Not, you get it? And so they used a little loophole in the words, etc. It said, number two, the minority must be politically cohesive. Well, what does politically cohesive means? Well, yeah, you did this because you want them all to be Democrats. That's why you drew it that way. See, it gave them permission for the glue. Do you understand the difference? Well, they got to be politically cohesive. This is why words matter. A little error like that, well, you got to prove they're politically cohesive. This is why you have heavy Democrat districts. They were drawn that way, right? And then you have to show the majority vote sufficiently as a block to usually defeat the minority's preferred candidate, okay? Now, when these were written, they were written to safeguard against dilution. I'm going to read these to you again because I want you to understand. The stuff that came down in 1986 said, these are the conditions if you're proving it. The majority group must be sufficiently large and geographically compact to form a majority in a single member district. Black rep, black district. Get it? I'll use that as an example. The second thing it says is the minority must be politically a hive. They must basically be cohesive. They must think the same way. And then number 3, the majority must vote sufficiently to block, normally, to defeat a minority's preferred candidate. This is what they did. Those 3 little pieces. You can see how it's misused. Well, let's just draw it this way. Let's take in this way. Let's take in this way. And they say they are concentrated here and way up here and all along this line. And we did what was right. You follow what happened? Oh, yeah. And they're all Democrats. Oh, they just happen to be black. This is why this is so key. This is how they used singular or 2-part words in the law to change the entire freaking intent of the law. And this is where it truly became racial engineering, right? And so what they did in order to meet the gingles, you can look it up. It's like giggles. It's an N and a G instead of GG, okay? Those factors could be loosely met. And so what happened as a result of that is race became the de facto factor for map drawing. And what they did is they overrode every existing redistricting principle, like compactness, continuity. You know, they have these little disconnected pieces, and you wonder, but why do these people go in this district and they're not even there on the map? They even took, continuity is like the outlines of your family farm, right? It's within the outline of your family farm. But when you see some of these wildly scattered, even broken, but no, you vote with this district. They didn't even require continuity at all. At all. They just said, nope, you're voting here. And this is how they did it. And that's how they overrode all of this traditional nature for political reasons, for communities of interest that they could control. Some districts, you think of a district, you should think of it as city blocks. Am I right? Your district. Some of these districts, the way they did it, would have districts that snaked hundreds of miles. This is how a lot of the traditionally red cities got taken over. This is why they're flipping their crap over it. Some of these districts would run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles connecting all of the black neighborhoods while they sliced right through the center of white ones because they needed the target tactical racial composition to get their people in. And this is what Louisiana did. And the way the census, which is all driven by the census, I'm not sure that I believe we have 330 million citizens in the United States. I don't. Right. Is that, would you say there? Yeah. LA district I live in snakes 240 miles. There you go. This is exactly how it's done. Yeah. Train tracks matters. You're right. And so what they did is they used these words and they went back to a census, right? And they started using the 2020 census they redistrict to create a second black majority district. And this is a 250-mile long district that linked Shreveport to Baton Rouge. Think about that. A 250-mile long gerrymander decided exclusively upon race. And this is the absolute legal fact that it is racial stereotyping, and this is what the Constitution forbids. I showed you all those pieces because I told you people don't pay attention. They don't audit things. And so people are going to believe the bullshit. It says you can't vote because you're black. This is the con, folks. We are not white Americans and brown Americans and black Americans and yellow Americans or whatever. We are just Americans. This is why I've taught so much on the hyphen. It's the hyphen that killed us. In the hyphen, divide and conquer, they say they represent you. They feed you a line of crap so you vote their way, and it's all about them getting power and money. The most affected are black Americans. And then they teach other black Americans who are basically on the plantation that if anybody walks away and says, I'm just an American, that you're an Uncle Tom. This is why shame, microaggressions, racism, this is how they do it. Period. Think about how many black actor Americans cannot admit they're conservatives, or when one comes out and admits they're conservative, they want to get rid of them. They need the stereotype. And so what happened is our system became entrenched in racial politics instead of transcending it. Everything Martin Luther King Jr. worked for, which is why his family's conservative, they undid in his name by just turning the tables, working in wood. So politicians and advocacy groups treated voters as racial blocks. That's it. All packed and then cracked for partisan gain. Yeah, packed and cracked. Slavery, I've also told you this. And traditionally, it benefits just one party. That's the Democrat Party. And that's the party claiming to be for civil rights, right? Now, what we got as a result of this was the assumption or the precedent, as Mr. Warlock says, that black voters could only be adequately represented by black preferred candidates and majority black districts. This is why they shun black Americans who come out for President Trump. They need people on the political plantation. This is just how it works, folks. And they have benefited and kept Americans suppressed, given them money to crank out more babies with no father in the home. This is what it is, right? The very thing that the Voting Rights Act was designed and put into our Constitution to eliminate is the very thing that happened, okay? So what happened is these maps, they would sue and get lower courts to bless these maps. And the Department of Justice, by the way. Now you understand why the DOJ was so rigged during the Biden administration. Yeah, the Department of Justice would sanction. Well, we don't see any problem with these. No, because they were all political pundits raping every American for political parties. That's right. And so the DOJ would chime in and look at it. Well, we don't see anything here. Well, we prefer the expansive reading of Section 2. And so what it did is it turned the Voting Rights Act into a quota system for congressional seats. You need more congressional seats? Let's just draw it a little further. The bottom line was this was never the law's intent. All that's happened in this, with no regard to what you see from all of the melanin dense freaking political idiots, all this is going back to exactly what it is. Now, there was some pushback that started pushing back in what's called Shaw versus Reno in 1993 and subsequent cases that basically held this: if race is in fact the predominant factor in drawing district maps, the map must survive strict scrutiny, a demanding standard requiring compelling interest and narrow tailoring. So government says we're going to fix this again. What happens? They go back to the Gingles. They kept on applying it. Well, it is. It's a reason. Get it? And so what happened is this one came up called Louisiana versus Callias. Think Cialis, right? Callias, right? And let me get rid of more spammers. Anyway, basically saying if it's properly construed, the law, if the properly construed, by the way, folks, when you post links in my program, you're gone. You're gone. That's it. You post links in my program, you are gone. Special links that I'm not talking about, and you want to divert somebody's attention to other bullshit, you're gone. That's the way this works. We're here to learn, not to do your little bullshit. Anyway, Louisiana versus Cialis ruling defines Section 2 properly construed does not demand or authorize race predominant redistricting absent clear evidence that traditional race neutral criteria cannot remedy an actual violation rooted in discrimination. In other words, you got to prove it. Well, Justice Alito, thank God, emphasized that the Constitution almost never permits the federal government or state to discriminate on the basis of race. He says there's nothing in here that allows the discrimination based on race. Period. Nothing. Nothing. And so we've got to get back to it. And so the states may no longer reflexively create majority and minority districts to preempt lawsuits. They must show that race is being used only as a last resort, narrowly tailored to a compelling interest. Proof. The decisions required courts to disentangle race from partisanship. That means you got to take race even out of it. We're Democrats. It cannot be tied to that's what gives you a Democrat majority. It basically said, and he acknowledged that often looks like racial vote dilution is simply political geography in a polarized electorate where voting patterns correlate with race but are not caused by it. In other words, we're getting back to the people. So what happens is in this ruling, it prevents the Voting Rights Act from being weaponized to force racial balancing, which a majority, correctly noted that would collide with the 14th Amendment equal rights protection under the law. You understand this one thing in the Voting Rights Act, as they drew these 250-mile-long districts to get power, everybody else in the district that wasn't their racial preference, their 14th Amendment gets violated because you're not treated equal under the law. It becomes a civil rights issue, right? And so you're going to see a lot of people crying over this, that it gutted the Voting Rights Act, and it's going to open the door for Republican gains in the House. This is all rhetoric. When the voter walks in the booth, the voter should expect equal treatment under the law, literally in their districts, to be based on where they really live, not they happen to live here and they had to have a little bit, but they extended it 250 miles away to connect another city. Think about how freaking ridiculous that is. Shreveport, right, is on the edge of East Texas. Conservative East Texas. But in order to control it, they basically drew this squiggly wiggly line going 250 miles distant to Baton Rouge. Yes. I must appropriate that French culture. Kunas. which is a good thing, by the way. And so they're screaming, well, Republicans are going to get the House. No, it's going to go back to, okay, well, let's see who else is stupid enough to post again. Right? So hang on. Bye-bye. People are ignorant sometimes. Ignorant. Okay. And so all this ruling is saying, you got to go back to the people. You got to go back to the people. And even if you think you're helping posting a link, don't post links in my program. Let me tell you why. And I know this might seem petty to people. If you were to read this banner right here, what does it say? My name. If you were to read the title of the program, that's the title. One of the reasons we lose is because everybody's vying for attention. And one of the ways to keep you from paying attention is over here, chase squirrel, over here, red shoes, 7 ways light. Folks, that's a con. Stop it. In my program, I know it's different than others because I don't give it to you in 3-minute bites. And no, you got to understand what it is. You got to understand. We just kicked through the Supreme Court doing its job the Voting Rights Act, as it was meant to be written, has now blocked the intentional race-based suppression of the right to vote. This is huge, and the left is going to bitch. The only thing that happened is politicians, forgetting about the people, can rig all this stuff to basically keep them in office, and it makes them permanently entitled to electoral outcomes. That shit is gone. Because what this is getting back to what it should be is the neutral criteria: equal population, compactness, preserving counties and cities, respecting natural communities. Natural communities. Do you think the conservatives in Shreveport were serviced by running a liberal district for 250 miles? No. It preserved nothing. It was designed to destroy. Designed to destroy natural communities. Why? Because that's where it happens. When Shreveport's voting for something in their city, they don't give a shit about Baton Rouge. Do you follow what I'm saying? This is why this is monumental. But if you're on the low end of the historical and legal understanding of what's going on, they're going to sell you, well, pretty soon it's going to be illegal to be black. This is how it works. This is a 100% honoring of our founders' vision of a republic. You get the little subtle difference there? See, what they did in drawing these little 250 miles lines, using the preponderance of people of a political persuasion, that's the Democrat. That's the democracy, where they just overweigh the people. But see, we're not that. We are a constitutional republic. Where you are is where you are, which is where you have compactness and neutral criteria and natural communities, and you wouldn't fucking live there if it was dangerous for you. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's free will, baby. And so this took us back to the founders' vision of that we are a republic where representation flows from the citizens as individuals and not members of racial groups. This is why this ruling is so monumental. And the only reason I'm doing this and asking you to focus on it, you have to understand how to defend it. This is a decision for a constitutional republic over and above, right? Over and above political bullshit race games, period. Now, here's what it does. Besides all the crookedness that happens, It takes away the incentive for perpetual race grievances and litigation, suing politicians to make it go a certain way. A lot of this lawfare and shit, it's been defined now. No, not doing it. So what does it force politicians to do? Where Warnock can sit there and say it's a white supremacy problem and white problem, by the way, which is racist. You now find a politician because they think they're sitting there and they're going to be covered because they got all this gerrymandering, can bash people of no melanin or very little melanin or not enough melanin. Politicians are going to have to learn to work within what? Their districts. Instead of politicians doing stuff for a party. This is why this is monumental. Instead of politicians doing it for a party to try to keep a party in power, it means the politician has to do it for their districts. And they have to be faithful to the law as it was intended. Now, what it does is it actually kills these permanent racial block voting, which is what Gingell's encouraged. Just do it by blocks, you'll always control it. You may see, enforced, you may see a lot of this blue hold where they'll go in and get a city and then the infection starts purple and then it turns blue, into the red. You're going to see this. Because instead of treating voters as a voting block, you have to treat a voter as an individual voter. It 100% outlaws these bizarrely maps that go all over the place that are only decided by racial math. Remember, they're racist. Who are the racists? The very people that are saying it's going to be against you are the actual racists. And it basically reinforces the 15th Amendment's prohibition on racial discrimination, especially in voting, without inverting it to a tool to actually create it. So what's this going to force to do is Louisiana now must redraw its maps based on race-neutral principles, as every other state will now be required to do. Let me repeat that again. This ruling will force Louisiana to withdraw or to redraw its current map, meaning it's no good. And it now has to be drawn basically on neutral principles. And you'll get better districts that have shared interests, not shared skin color, shared interest. That is a healthier republic. For way too long, this con of using words, all under the Voting Rights Act, you're going to make black people not vote, you're going to make brown people not vote, you're going to make homo people not vote, is over. That sword they used to swing to gerrymanders, over. This new ruling, Kyalis, it basically corrected the distortion, insisting that redistricting served the Constitution's color-blind command. It restores the Voting Rights Act to its original noble purpose, ensuring that every American, not black Americans, not brown Americans, every American can vote and have their vote counted equally without the government sorting us by race. Now, this is not the end of majority representation at all. It just means that everybody's going to be counted equally as it should be. It's going to mean that politicians are going to no longer wag your district because somebody in Louisiana has got you over in Baton Rouge. It's not going to happen. It's going to be based on merit. It's going to be based on ideas and your actual community ties. And let me tell you, Shreveport and Baton Rouge are two different cities. And this is what it's supposed to be. Equal rights equals right. The laws were always intended to have a nation where race does not dictate electoral density. And so after decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of abuse, this is over. And you're right, it's as it should be. And you're right, Warnock would have never been there for stuff like this. And so this is why it's monumental. This is why it's a big deal. This is why they've known it's been coming. They say, well, we need more justices. We need this. And now they're planning, well, who are these justices? They weren't even elected. Get it? So that's going to be the new fight. Because this ruling is big. But for the last word of this ruling, let's listen to somebody. Well, you decide.
I'm going to say this. The Democratic Party wants to talk about how black people their voting power is going to be suppressed by this Voter Rights Act not being gutted, but they just made sure that the Democrats can't benefit off making unfair, gerrymandered, race-only districts. It does not dilute the black vote. They can still go out and vote for who their representative is. But they cannot have their own representative. Like black people have their own representative and everybody else has to vote for a representative. That's not fair, right? That was needed at the time, but we're not in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s anymore. We're not in that era, and anybody that says we are is delusional. But the real suppression of the black vote has been what the Democrats have done with bringing in millions of illegal immigrants and abortion of our children. I was just talking about this. 45% of abortions are by black people, right? We have been at 13% of the population for a very, very long time in this country. You know why? Because the black community, black women and black men especially black women, have gone out there aborting their children, sleeping around with different men, and have aborted their children. And so we have been at 13%. We are now behind Hispanics as far as it goes, as far as like the minority group. Why? Because we continue to be influenced by Cardi B's and Meg Thee Stallion type women, and we continue to go out there and have unmarried sex. We continue to go out there and do those things, and we have babies out of wedlock, and then we kill the babies. And so we have 45%. Just imagine if those 45% weren't aborted. Black people would probably be 25, 30% of the country right now. So you want to talk about suppression of our vote and our voices. Let's talk about the 45% of black babies that have been killed in the womb by Margaret Zahner's plan to eradicate the black community, that black people have participated in and black preachers have stood with and in solidarity with. And also the illegal immigrants that they have brought in to replace the black community. That's what we should be talking about in the black community, but we're not going to talk about that.
Pretty impressive, isn't it? People are waking up. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Great things are happening. A lot of people have been fighting to keep this stuff from ever getting done. This part about the machines, you can see how this is a meaningful change. But this is why this part, it's the machines, and it's all deception. The system wants to keep it the same, both left and right, baby. And this is why you have to understand what's real, what's not, what works, what's crap, etc. Right? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I shared the link to you just now. I want to make sure you join me. I'm going to be covering my continued Islam series, everything you need to know about Islam. And we're going to talk about the blood caravans of the Sahara. If you're on Rumble, you're one click away from joining my locals. Just click the red button. We are under an invasion. Who wants to get rid of our religion, control our lives, put us under Sharia law? It's happening all over. UK has fallen. It's here. You have to understand how it's done. That's what I'm covering next on my locals. Make sure you join me, folks. You've got the link. Give you time to join. I'll see you.
You'll fight for free and fair elections. Invent and scan the ballots of kinematic artifact detection. You love to read and learn, travel and explore. You're a fearless, braveheart patriot who's opened doors. You are courage, you're our voice. Jovan, we thank you for what you're fighting for. You're our warrior. You are brave like a lion. You're David fighting Goliath, couldn't ask for more. You're our warrior. Think of what you've done for you, for me, for our country. You'll go down in history as our warrior. You lead by God and always do what's right. In the battle for our nation, you lead the fight. We pray for your safety, the armor of God to protect you from all of us. Here's a thank you for all that you do. You are courage, you're our voice. Jovan, we thank you for what you're fighting for. You're our warrior. You are brave like a lion. You're David fighting Goliath, couldn't ask for more. You're our warrior. Think of what you've done for you, for me, for our country. You'll go down in history as our warrior. Jovan, you're a hero we stand behind. We're inspired by the fire inside your eyes. American proud, we know you'll fight till your dying day. And we'll always stand behind you through everything. You are courage, you're our voice. Jovan, we thank you for what you're fighting for. You're our warrior. You are brave like a lion. You're David fighting Goliath, couldn't ask for more. You're our warrior. Think of what you've done for you, for me, for our country. You'll go down in history as our warrior.